right, what's going on? This is the Pat Life Podcast, and today is going to be a good one. A lot of gravy in this one. I've been thinking about this one for months, trying to figure out how to approach this, how I want to get the information across, making sure it's coherent, making sure it's entertaining. So I hope you guys enjoy. Now, as I've said in other videos in regards to storytelling, if you're seeing and experiencing a really good story, the people who've created it have made sure that everything that you're witnessing has purpose. And everything that we, in regards to sound, sight, sometimes smell, if you're in a theater, which we'll talk today, beats, facial expressions, all lighting, all this costumes, I can keep going, but you get the point. It all has a purpose, and where in the story it isn't brought into the story or brought to your witness is also an important part as well. Now, we're going to talk about the musical Hamilton and how that pertains so much to today. And we're going to talk about the power of self and how that relates to Hamilton as well. Now, full disclaimer rather, I've seen the show on Broadway. I like the show. I enjoy it. I love the music. I have the music on my phone. It is very, very entertaining. I am not knocking this show at all. There is not a single thing that I'm saying or will say that is saying negativity towards the show. I know people that were in the original show that I am very grateful for them accommodating and let me see the show, and insanely good performers. I know people in the touring shows, same thing. So none of this is coming from a negative place. It's seeing and showing everything that I've been talking about in regards to how in stories it's not so different than what we're experiencing in our everyday life, and we can learn things that are so prevalent in sometimes stories that are sprinkled in or either shown directly to us right in front of our eyes, or what is more hidden. And Hamilton's a great place to start. Now, for those who don't know, Hamilton's the story about Alexander Hamilton. The people moving from England to America, separating themselves from King George in England. The Revolutionary War, and ultimately signing the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Basically, our freedom, as they would say. So I want to start off with just some questions. And the first question I want to ask is, why was this show created when it was? And when I say now, I mean of recently, 2016. Why was it created now? People can say, Lin-Manuel Miranda was seeing the world around him and he was aware of this. Okay, that's a possibility. I do know that the show was on at the Joe's Pub, I believe a year or two before. So that means he was writing the show well before the political realm we're seeing now. And how do I know this? Well, because I know people who went and saw it. As I said before, I know somebody that's in the show or in the original cast. So why was it made now? Why is a show or a musical that's entertaining us, that's holding our mind, about a story about government controlling our mind, to control the mind? We are watching, with the musical, a story. Our mind is held by a story about our minds, how our minds are controlled, our government. Literally, that's the translation. And just think about that for a second. We are brought into a world and held. Our mind is held. We are kept in that entertainment about a story about our minds, or how our minds became controlled. We're entertained by our government, the story of our government. And when you understand that, and understanding that the timing of all this is so interesting, and very profound that, is it a coincidence that Trump, who is looked at as King George, came out, right after he started his presidency? It came out in August 6th on Broadway, 2016. That's when it debuted, supposedly. And is it also by chance that is this turmoil with, Trump and Pence, with a lot of people in America? Pence went and saw the show in the midst of all this, and the cast after during the bow were basically singled him out. And not saying anything, I don't recall anything disrespectful. It was just being like, look, we are all people, all these things. But Pence was booed out. That got national, international news. So now that was spread through the internet, through TV, everywhere. Everywhere in the world now seeing that wants to know what that musical was about, or what is that musical. They are now entertained. Their mind is held about a story about how our minds are controlled. Do you follow? That sparked international attention about not just Hamilton, but even more so our government, the entertainment of our government. How do we know this? Think about worldwide, the attention that our political environment has gotten in just these last 4 years. As I said, is it a coincidence that Trump started his presidency in 2016? Hamilton hit Broadway 2016. The show blew up. It's a great show still. But also understanding that that show then, the franchise has made over $1 billion. And to say that that moment with Pence, thinking about story, the inciting incidents, getting the story even more on its path, creating more attention and tension through the story, to say that that was a coincidence, I would say I don't think so. There's purpose to that, understanding the story that in our lives in which we live in, whether you see it or not. And I go into this much depth because I, from my own experience, got brought into the entertainment back then. I watched the show. I was enthralled by the rapping, the like just the energy of the entire room. You felt it with the people there. It was so invigorating. And as I was watching the show, and to this day listening to the music, I was like, yeah, man, this is good. This is great. But I never really listened to the words, all the words that were being said, the story, the history that was being told. And it dawned on me just even within the last year of that, what is the story? Do I really know my Constitution? Do I know about the Declaration of Independence? Do I know the ins and outs of this? And it made me realize, was there being something presented in the story of Hamilton that was trying to tell me something deeper? Was there a symbology that I was missing? And as I've said in other videos, the symbology that we've seen with Hamilton for a lot of people has been, the fact that it was an all, Black, Hispanic, multicultural cast. And the only, as they would say, the only white man or Caucasian was the King George. So that for people is a symbolic of change, growth, power in the show, and freedom. And we're going to talk a lot about that here throughout. So a lot of people took that symbology as that. Specifically, the moment that the cast spoke to Pence, they took that moment, that calling out, that it was a symbolic moment for a lot of people of standing up to what we consider the bad man or the tyranny, or whatever you want to call it. And again, I'm not bashing, I'm not saying anything negative, I'm just calling it like it is. The important thing to see is those are symbols for a lot of people that has stayed. And how do I know? Well, the franchise has made over $1 billion. Clearly people are enthralled with it still. And that's in 4 years. It's not a lot of shows on Broadway that hit the $1 billion club. It's a very small few, especially in 4 years. That's a lot. So clearly it was doing something more than just the entertainment. There is a programming to it. But I'll take a step back here. Now, as I said, the symbols of those things are there. People took that symbol and they ran with it. But what other symbols are there? Well, if you look at on the poster of Hamilton, it's the star, and you see the Hamilton at the top pointing up. Now think about that for a second. And before I did my research, I didn't really know anything. I just like, oh, cool, it's great. Understand that geometrically, the pentagram, the upward facing pentagram, is the sign for man or woman. And he's pointing up. So it's the man pointing up. Where? To the sky, to the heavens. And there's an important line, and we're not going to go into it right now, but we will get to it, is when there's the song called Raise a Glass to Freedom, something they can never take away no matter what they tell you. And we will keep going back to this because it's important. But as we go into this, I also want people to understand that that symbol is freedom. The show talks a lot about that freedom. But what is freedom? Now, let's actually go into the history during that time and how in the story they're demonstrating and they're showing us the truths of the story. The show is profoundly awesome, man. There's so much gravy in that show. When I went back and really sat with it, looked into it, there's an insane amount of gravy. And one thing that really stood out to me was how they were able to get all this information through this rap style, this cadence. For me, that really drew me in. And so you're following the beat, talking about how rhythm and frequency, music can pull you into a suggestive state. Is that you're listening to the cadence. You know, in the opening song, it's like how does a bastard orphan son of, and it goes da 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 da. And from my experience, myself included, you're in the theater doing this. And I remember, because I was in a standing position, I saw people sitting, young, old, you know, white, Caucasian, black. What doesn't matter? Everybody, to some extent, was going like this. And I remember thinking, wow, that's so interesting. Everybody's feeling this beat. So as the time went on, we're now enthralled with the beat. And that's what a lot of that hip hop can do. And it is a programming where you become into a suggestive state, you get brought in, and now, yes, you're listening to the rhythm, but sometimes those words get lost. So that was one really important thing that I started to notice looking back is, okay, so there's a rhythm, there's a beat, and I'm getting drawn in. But what are the words? What's the underline here? And they even in the title of the songs will start to spell things out. Now, as we know, there was the Revolutionary War. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed. Now, that was when we were told that we have our rights as, free men and women. But what's interesting is understanding through Hamilton what else was happening historically. And when you understand that when we separated from England, as this was going on, the war was going on, we had a couple people in France, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin. Now, why were they there? They were there for peace treaties and, negotiations. But why them? And this is in the show. There's a song called What Did I Miss? Where Thomas Jefferson comes back. It's a jingle. It's fun. It's very da-da-da-da-da-da. And the gentleman who plays it, Daveed Diggs, does a great job. Very entertaining. Brings you in to his upbeat, high energy. why, understanding why were those three gentlemen there? Well, there was a deal that was being made. Why? Because we owed $6 million or whatever the currency is for France, but about like 6 million, a lot of money that we owed France for the war. So, being that those three men were there, why were they there? Well, they're all esquires for negotiation. They're lawyers dealing with our debts. Now, I believe the 13th or 14th Amendment originally was stated as that no esquire or person or line of nobility can hold a political position. And then they changed that to, blacks have freedom and have is just as many rights. And they made that change, but understand that the original amendment was that no esquires or nobility can hold political office. And then it was changed. Why don't we know that mainstream? Why isn't that in the front of our mind? Why doesn't that pull our attention? I don't know how many of us know that. But they made that change quietly. And I ask you, how many people in government right now are esquires or noble, have a family bloodline that is of the noble bloodline? A lot. And you don't believe me, you can go look it up yourself. You can do the research. So clearly that change was made for a reason. All this you can look up yourself. So Jefferson, Esquire, Benjamin Franklin, Esquire, and John Adams, Esquire, all going to do a business deal for our debts, contracts. As we owe $6 million, now you get to 1776. No, 1787, sorry. And by 1783, our $6 million was owed in 7 years. So by 1790, we were supposed to owe that debt. So what happened in 1787? The Constitution was signed. It was created, rather. And that Constitution was just a rewording, a restructuring of our debt. Because that debt by then got up to $18 million. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Who bought the debt from France? England, the England Bank. And what's interesting is so now we separated from England to be independent. We now owe debt to England because France, it was bought by England. So now it came full circle. That being said, the thing that we left for, freedom, is now back in these people's hand. And how is that shown in Hamilton? Well, as I said before, think about timing. Think about when people enter stage, where they enter stage, how their emotion is when they enter the stage. What is their costume? What is their facial expression? What song are they singing? If you all recall, think about when King George came on. He sings a song about reminding people of their love. Or there's a specific song called You'll Be Back. Think about that. It's like, you'll be back soon, you'll see something you've always belonged to me. He's talking about this in this song, and he's telling us in pivotal moments where we're seeing, Hamilton and Washington and Jefferson, all this freedom occurring and on our path towards freedom. He comes in at only certain points in a very comedic, flamboyant way to say, you'll be back. You will see. You still belong to me. And he's right. Our debt was bought back by England banks. So now we owe England. And that's where the Constitution was, a rewriting of the debt. So what was the rewriting of the debt? The rewriting was them saying, look, you need to put in a central bank. So that central bank ultimately puts us back into the we're indebted to England. So the thing that we were running away from is now what is in America. Is now because it's now they basically England has taken over and controls the federal institution of America, the corporation it's becoming. And they show this in Hamilton in a very creative, very thought out way. King George only enters the stage a few times, and it's there to remind the audience that, hey, as happy and as great as this all is, you still belong to me. But it's so comical. He's flamboyant about it. He's very funny about how he's saying, I'm going to kill all your friends and family because just to remind you how much I love you and that you're going to be back. And that goes over our head because we're so involved in the story, or we just don't know the information. And that was me. That was my experience. I didn't know what I was seeing. I just was involved. I was brought into the story about how our minds are controlled by government. So for those who think I'm far-fetched, as I said, as a creator, people who really create amazing stories that want to get points across, they have to do it sometimes in the most beautiful artistic ways, and that's how you get pulled in, and you don't even realize what you're being pulled into. But it's important to also know the information. So as you're seeing through the show, King George is coming on. He's constantly, as I said, talking about reminding them, hey, you'll be back, and you're mine. I own you. You're indebted to me, because we couldn't pay off the debts. We didn't have the money. So what ended up happening, that 6 million, as I said, went to 18 million. And then once it became this federal debt, essentially, instead of 7 years to pay it off, there was a forgiveness of 70 years. And with that forgiveness of 70 years was, as I said, the central bank. So now, 70 years, I'm kind of jumping away from Hamilton for a sec. What happened? What happened 70 years? Roughly 1850, 1860. The Civil War. Now, a lot of people think that the Civil War is just about freeing slaves. Not going to go down it, but just understand that, just for a moment, just disregard that for a sec, and just understand that what happened at the end of the war, what transpired. That now the debts that we owed, we could not pay. The number became so extravagant, I can't remember off the top of my head, but the money that we owed, we could not pay. So what happened then? Federal is controlled, then it became a state control. The states then became part of the corporation of America that was indebted to England, Rome, etc. Okay, another 70 years to pay the debts that we owed. What is the timeline now? Where are we? 1933, FDR. In that time, the Great Depression, what happened? We became off the gold standard. Everybody's gold was taken. That was where the currency was backed. That's where our money had backing. It had something tangible. That was taken away. Why? Because we couldn't pay the debts. So how was that money, how was our debts then paid? Through the trust of birth certificates. So now the federal is owned, state is owned, and now within the people. But you can't own a person that becomes a slave, and that is unlawful under their own guise of the higher law, equity law, God's law. It's illegal. It's unlawful. So what do? They own the corporation, the name of the person. And I know this might be a little crazy for people, and I'm not saying this to scare anybody. I'm just explaining this history here. And when King George is saying, you'll be back, you belong to me, understanding that there's so much dichotomy in that show about freedom. And raise a glass to freedom, something they can never take away no matter what they tell you. And this is where it's so, the beauty in all this, I know I've jumped around here, but it's so profound in what we're seeing now specifically. A lot of people, just going along with emotions, feeling like there's no out. I don't know, I have to do what I'm told. I have to be complacent. I have to um, just, go with the flow and just hope this all goes away because I don't know what to do. But understand the power's with you. You have the freedom when you understand that your breath, the breath of life that God has given you, the divine spark that you were, that became you in your mother's womb, that right there, they cannot take away. Nobody can take that away from you. And when in the show Hamilton, Hamilton says to Bird, I have it right here, if you stand for nothing, Bird, what will you fall for? And if every single one of us thinks that we are, we're nothing, our thought doesn't matter, we're just, they're going to just tell us what to do and we have to do it. That's not true. But you have to stand for something. It's not saying going in the streets and fighting. It's about understanding that you are not alone in this journey. I hear time and time again, people will talk about, in specifically New York City, man, with so many people in the city, I still feel so alone. And it's understanding that even when you have bodies around you, there might still feel that sense of, I don't know my purpose. I don't feel I belong. I'm alone. But when you can take a minute and really understand and at least accept to some extent that you have this breath of life, that present moment is what is your connection to that higher being. Hamilton pointing up, the pentagram, the man, the symbol, the geometrical symbol of man, the pentagram, and Hamilton at the top pointing up, being like, man connected with God. For those who don't believe me, think this is way out there, I don't care. But I ask you to look into it. I ask you to open up your lens a little bit here and really consider this. And this is a beautiful thing about Hamilton is they're saying in this time during 2016 and on, where there's so much despair, there's so much chaos, they remind you after $1 billion of income, revenue, people getting instilled with this, that hey, raise your glass to freedom because that is something they can never take away no matter what they tell you. Mandates, orders, all these things, they're not the law. And I'm not saying you have to be crazy. Don't be crazy. You have to work within an environment. You have to be structured. You have to be, in some capacities, complicit with the nature of the people around you in order to have, harmony, symbiosis. Don't go on the streets and loot. Don't go trying to start problems. Don't bring hate to people that you feel are hateful. Try to understand, be grateful, breathe your life, give your breath, your purposeful breath to the world around you because you are worth it. You are deserving of this life. You have a purpose and find it. But it's also understanding that it's more than just the material body. There is a spiritual component. And I don't expect everybody to walk away having immediately that connection. I know I didn't. It took me time. But when I understood it and I was able to really sit with it and feel it, it's a profound feeling. And that show is so good because it makes that clear, at least in my life. And even with all the history of understanding that, yes, there's corporations, these countries are corporations, there's debts that are still never paid. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. As long as you don't give your breath away, your breath of life, your God-given breath to other people's consensually, nobody can take that away. You are in the driver's seat. And that, for me, was this, wow, I do have control over my life. I do have the ability to see the outcomes that I want to. And I hope other you as well can do that too. And the show is even better talking about, giving the breath of life. George Washington, the character plays George Washington says, dying is easy, young man. Living is harder. Now, on the surface level, he is saying, hey, when you're dead, you don't have to worry about what's happening in this moment. Okay. But let's take that a step further in the stuff that we're talking about. And wow, there's so much in this that is just so ingrained, and it's so intertwined so well. When you understand that the birth certificate, and I'll keep it very simplistic, the birth certificate is a sign of that entity of you coming into this world is lost at sea, you're considered dead. But you get all the privileges, you get all of the, you know, the gifts of being in society. It's just follow the rules, be in the privilege, but you're what they would consider a dead entity lost at sea. But being a living man or a living woman, as much as you have you have true freedom understanding that journey, and I'm still on that journey trying to figure that out and really embody what that means. It takes a lot more work. It's a lot harder. So on the superficial level, yes, he's right, but on that deeper level, he's also right. And you're now having to take, where's my food coming from? Where's my water coming from? If my medicine, I can't just necessarily go to the grocery store. And why is this important? Because right now in the world, we're seeing people are trying to figure out how to, you know, make their own food, garden, and that's great because people are starting to realize, what if there's scarcity? What if I can't get the things, the necessities I need? Do I know what I'm doing? And this is a great awakening. And the timing of that show and this and what we're experiencing now wasn't a mistake, but it's allowing ourselves to see what it was trying to say. Now, maybe there is some subversion in it, but I'm trying to look at the positive, the optimism of what that show can bring and has brought if you really pay attention. And that the entertainment that I'm seeing now from the controlling of the mind is that I can open my eyes to what has been implemented and programmed into me and hopefully everyone else. Because you can take that and really start a life where you see your purpose, but it takes sacrifice. Being a living man or woman takes a lot of sacrifice. And if you're not willing to take it, then you can still live as what we would consider a dead man or a dead woman with the privileges, with all the benefits. But you're under someone else's guise. You're indebted to somebody else. And it's not to scare anybody. This isn't despairing, it's understanding that there's a choice. You have choice. And I've said this before in my breakdown with the other movie, it's the Saw movie about, live or die. You have a choice. What is the life that you want to live? And I think it's important, and I think it's beautiful to see that when the choice is really in your hands, you can live a life where you have God, you have the breath of life to remind you, or you can, say no to that and say that's ridiculous. Let me cover that breath of life because I might have something that I don't even know that I have. But at the same time, that, if I can give something negative to somebody, could I also give something positive? If I have a really good immunity, could my breath of life actually help somebody? Why does it always have to be negative? Why does it always have to be, oh, I can kill somebody or I can hurt somebody? What if I can bring life to somebody? What if they can bring life to me? What if they can bring a healing energy to my life just with their breath, their presence, not being so far away, not fearing them coming into my field, but actually embracing it and going, wow, this person actually is helping me have a healthier, holistic life compared to, no, their breath is going to kill me. It's your decision. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm not here to even persuade you, but it's just a matter of what is the life that you want to live. So anyway, that's quite a bit of stuff that I've tried to bring into a short period of time. But as I just recap, we are entertained by this show, this musical, because it's showing us how our minds are controlled. Government, it's showing us the government. And when you can take that and see, I'm watching the government as a play right now, as a musical. The history of our government as a musical. Who's to say that right now that there isn't still a play happening? There isn't a story, a show being presented to us. And when you realize that many parts of it is a show, you look at the things that you're seeing and going, those aren't adding up. And I ask people that are feeling that things don't add up. My livelihood is being affected here. I'm losing my job, or I'm not, I don't know if I can make a next paycheck. I have family members who don't know if they're going to be able to get food. Understand that you have more control over how this outcome, you know, takes place. But it's about raising that glass to freedom, because that is something they can't take away no matter what they tell you. That is a very true statement. But you have to be willing to step into those shoes, step into that ownership, own the ship that you have, connect to it, understand the breath of life that you have. How we stop things that people are trying to enforce on us is you just don't do it. I have friends in the fitness business who are now losing or having to close shop again, and they have the data to show that there was no, literally statistically showing that no effects of the gym causing any sort of increase in numbers or anything that you want to believe. And now they can't work their job because of that. And I'm not saying this in a despairing and a negative or depressing way. I'm saying, okay, I know you guys are talking about it. I know you're speaking up. It's starting to get ridiculous and you see it. Understand that they don't control you. You have more power than you believe. You just have to follow, in my opinion, God. You have to follow truth, logos, and go, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I don't consent. All this stuff we're seeing is an offer. If you don't consent, there's nothing they can do. If McDonald's says, hey, you need to buy a burger from us, and I go, no, I don't, then they leave you alone. There's nothing else they can do. It's a corporation. But it's us also have to take ownership, understanding that we have to take more responsibility. But that responsibility comes sacrifice, and that sacrifice becomes growth, and that growth becomes a new potential and a new understanding of purpose and self that is profound. And I'm repeating myself just because I want this to be instilled, and I hope people see the importance of this. Anyway, I might be missing some stuff. I know I jumped around. If anyone has any questions, I'm always happy to answer. But for now, this is the Pat Life podcast, and I know I'm going to forget something, and I'm going to think about it later. But I hope you all have a great day.